What's up you guys, and welcome back to a Reddit reading video. Today we're going to be doing r/ProRevenge, one of my favorite subreddits of all time, probably my second favorite after r/Malicious compliance, honestly. This one's going to be a doozy, I can tell. It's gilded, 1.3k upvotes. I have not read this yet, so this is the first time I'm going to be reading it. We're going to be like listening to it together, so this is going to be great. I ruined the life of a man who molested me for 3 years. This is a throwaway account simply due to the fact that I have friends who know my account name and are unaware of the current issues in my personal life. I would also like to apologize if I am all over the place with my storytelling. I am not very good at this, and there's a lot to put in one post. I understand that this is not a light subject matter, and I would like to consider that it's my official trigger warning for any survivors of sexual assault/abuse. Part of the reason I'm writing this post is a form of therapy and a chance to feel more in control of my life than I currently am, so bear with me. In order to understand the reasoning behind the revenge, I need to start at the beginning. I was born into a family of very well off. I had a great childhood with 5 siblings, and I was practically a trust fund baby. This was up until around 8 years old, when my parents divorced for a number of reasons, which I will not get into. Long story short, my dad left my mother on her own to take care of 6 kids all on her own, ranging from 6 years old to a 19-year-old. She was of course vulnerable at this time in her life, and in need of someone to help her out. Anyone would have felt the same in her position. So in walks this guy, let's call him Satan. Satan was an amazing person at first. He was a strong parental role and didn't mind the duty of 6 children along with a huge house to live in. Seeing as how he was only a waiter at a restaurant, he was glad to feel like the boss somewhere. My mom relied on him a lot during the first few months of the relationship, which led to her trusting him a bit too much and opening up my family up to problems. Satan is what most consider completely freaking insane. Each week he was convinced of some new conspiracy theory and always dragged my family into it. He was a doomsday prepper and made my family and I stockpile food months ahead of time, along with things like training us on how to quickly load and unload guns when I was only 9 years old. Now while my older sibling could see clear as day that Satan was insane, my mother and other siblings close to my age completely trusted him. The 2 older siblings were even kicked out before graduation and ended up not speaking with my mother for years. I can't really blame them, but I wouldn't blame my mother either, seeing as how mentally manipulative Satan could be. We all felt as though he was a lifeline to us, and without him, we would die. Because my parents divorced, my mother was left to sell a mansion of a house, which during 2010 or so obviously didn't go over well. We were struggling financially, big time. Satan had my siblings and mother convinced that he was our only financial support and that leaving him would result in being on the street, because he had to cut off the rest of our family from speaking to us, because they saw how insane he was. We all believed it. Now I won't get in too much detail about my abuse at this moment, but I'll let you know that Satan began molesting me just a few months after I had turned 10 years old. There is no easy way to put this, but I was terrified. All I knew was that what was happening was wrong and that me saying something meant I would be homeless. I thought I was protecting both myself and my family, so I let it continue. And for any victim blaming a-holes out there who might after a 10-year-old girl, anytime I didn't comply, I was forced into what was basically solitary confinement. I would sit and stare at a blank wall for days on end with only peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to eat and water to drink. CPS was called once, but the investigation was unrelated to this and didn't go very far. My mother was told I was being grounded for other reasons and even thought I might be being molested, but I went as far as denying it in fear of what could happen to us. My siblings and I switched schools way too often for me to make any real friends, and during the final years of my abuse, we had moved out of state. I never had a phone or any way of contacting anyone to help me out with my situation. I was alone and nobody knew. My life was a living HE double hockey sticks. The sexual abuse continued for 3 years until my mother finally gathered the courage and hid enough money to escape. This would seem simple enough, but it wasn't a clean cut. In 2011, my mother had given birth to my baby sister and his daughter. We will call her Angel. The first day was spent moving into a house that my aunt and mother had reconnected with, and terrifyingly enough, within 24 hours, we moved back in with Satan. This is just an example of how insane the entire situation was. And though it was slow going at first, eventually we officially split from him and moved far away. But because my baby sister was there, despite us leaving Satan, he would always be around. Now though Angel was the daughter of Satan himself, I loved her and still love her to this day, more than anyone or anything, and have always been torn for this reason. I understand my selfishness and staying quiet, but I had my reasons. From wanting her to have a normal life, to her being his own bloodline, while I was not. I came up with a million excuses, but the gist of it was I was scared. I had no evidence, and I didn't want her to hate me for being the reason she didn't have a dad. Satan went on to be a trucker and now has a girlfriend of about 5 years. Because of this, he only has the opportunity to see Angel a few times a year for less than 24 hours at a time. And when he does see Angel, always in his truck, within feet of his girlfriend, or out in public. I use this as justification for not saying anything to anyone as well. And I do not need to be told how selfish it was to put her at risk, because I understand and I have suffered the guilt in all these years. This is where the revenge part comes in. Thank you for being patient. Angel is now 8. I'm 19 and Satan is 50. Angel understands how insane her dad is, but loves him nonetheless. And up until this point, he has stayed far away from my family. Angel and I are as close as two people can be. Angel confided in me a few weeks ago that her dad wanted to take her for a week or two down to Florida, hundreds of miles away. This was a no-go. I was scared of what would happen, but I knew that taking this risk would make me worse than him. That took a lot of courage, but I knew it had to be done. So I went to my mom that night and told her what happened all those years ago. It went about as well as I expected, and after about 12 hours of crying, her and I went to protection mode. My mother and Satan have never had custody disagreements and have always been on good terms for Angel's sake, despite his mentally abusive tendency. Despite this, she had stockpiled years of text and recording in case he passed, and he had attempted to gain full custody of Angel. She spoke with her attorney, and within a few days, we went down to the sheriff's office of the counties where the sexual assault occurred. Now yes, I did type counties because if you remember earlier, I said that we had moved during the time that the sexual abuse was occurring. This meant that I could file in multiple counties, making the case stronger. While one county was a case of sexual assault of a minor, the other was rape case due to the nature of the molestation. As well as this, due to the age I was during the molestation and its severity, it is not being disregarded. We asked that the detectives from each county wait for a week or so in order for my mothers and I to serve protection restraining order against Satan, and they agreed. This protects me and my mother and anyone in our household from him, from the moment he is served and before he is even aware that we have filed against him. Along with the fact that there are no custody disagreements over Angel for Satan to claim my accusations were fake, my mother and I were able to reach out to the other girls who we suspected of being victims of him as well. Now there's a second girl willing to testify. I just finished my affidavit and have given my written statement about everything that has ever been done to me, which over the course of 3 years was a lot considering it was a daily occurrence. I came here to feel better knowing that at the very least, he would not be allowed to see Angel again without supervision. And this is even if the case does not go as planned due to the text/recording show his insanity. Though my hope is that he will go to jail for a long time, this is the least I can ask for and will take what I can get for her safety. The only worry there is that he could become a martyr. He will be served within the next few days, and knowing him and his paranoia, he won't see this because he's afraid of the internet. Angel will be seeing my family therapist, whose job is to make sure she was never hurt while not putting ideas into her mind. I feel proud myself because in spite of everything that happened, he's a truck driver with a miserable life that's about to get worse. On the other hand, I graduated in top 5% of my class and am now an engineering student, currently debt-free due to scholarships and my savings, with a close group of friends and a boyfriend of 2.5 years. My family has since reconnected with everything in his life that he damaged is now better in the lack of his presence. My half-sister loves me more than she ever will love him. As far as I see it, I have won. He has lost. Just a disclaimer, please don't tell me what a horrible sister I am. Anything you say, I have already told myself over the years. I don't know what else to say, but that I wish I knew earlier that everything could turn out okay. TLDR, I have finally served the man who molested me for 3 years and have destroyed what's left of his pathetic life. Oh man, that story was a doozy. Honestly, that's probably the saddest story I have read out loud in any of these posts. That's really sad to read. The top comment said, "This is the bravest yet most heartbreaking post I've read so far. My thoughts are with you. Best of luck for the future, OP." Yeah, that kind of hurts to read. Like, it sucks that happened to her for so many years, but it's good that she's finally, stepping up so that her half-sister won't have to be molested like she was. When she was a kid, she felt like she was doing the right thing by saving her family from not living on the streets. But while doing that was being just totally abused into the ground and used up, which sucks for her case, but she says the little girl does have therapy and hopefully she does too. Just so I don't leave you guys on the saddest story in history and just run out of here, let's read one more short story that's not as depressing. Chef leaves all his notes, almost kills the business. At the restaurant I used to work at, there was a chef who made the best gumbo I have ever had. However, the management where I worked was awful. The only employees who stayed for very long were the ones who were paid well, e.g. Mr. Gumbo. Customers knew him by name. The only day he called in sick, which he had never done before, and they didn't let him. He had enough and quit. But he also burned a few bridges. He took all his notes, which had ratios, spices, times and temperatures, everything. We had no idea how to make his gumbo. They tasked me with recreating it. When it was nowhere near as good, most of the gumbo customers, which was a lot of them, left. I quit shortly after. From what I heard from my friends who still work there, the business almost went under. This was his way of making the management pay. Sorry for spelling and formatting. Edit to start, we aren't in the South. This was a smaller place, but it was still good size. The menu wasn't that big, so the gumbo was very important. The chef did have every right to leave, but by doing so, the business lost most of its valuable assets. That is how the gumbo man got back in the management. Good job, gumbo man. I feel you so hard on that. That reminds me so much of Walmart. Like, you have 5 days out of the year. If you're sick, to stay home. If you're late, if you call in and you can't come to work today, anything, if you get in trouble, everything counts as 1 point. If you get 5 points, you're out. You automatically fired. So if you're sick 5 days in a row, you're automatically fired. I can't tell you how many days I had to go in just deathly sick, throwing up in the bathroom, and the only way that it doesn't count as a point is if they send you home. So I would just be, so sick and throwing up, and then they would send you home. It's a shame that you have to do that in some places. Golden boys of my hometown get taken down? Trigger warning. Okie dokie. So for part of high school, I lived in a super duper ultra small town in California. If you're familiar with the area, just saying, 5 by 8 Mile Island, where peanut butter was invented, to tell you exactly the town. Since it's super small though, I'll abstain. I lived in a bunch of other places, from big cities to tiny villages and third world countries. By the time I started my junior year in this town, also the story takes place about 13 to 14 years ago, so my memory might be a teasy bit foggy. I've got the important stuff though. My point is, I was a bit more cultured than the average of my class, and not known as a poop taker. On this island, there was these 3 guys called Nick. That's not their real name, it's just another generic name that all 3 of them happened to share. They weren't particularly good students, they were on the lower end of the economic spectrum, but their parents had been on the island forever. All of them were super fun M&M types, without any talent. All 3 were notorious for hooking up with girls without consent. All 3 were well known for being abusive to the women they dated. To differentiate, I'll say that Fat Nick, Boof Nick, and My Nick. Because yeah, I was one of the lucky girls who dated a Nick. Fat Nick was dating a good friend of mine. He beat her, he cheated on her, roofied her, and then assaulted her. At one point, his abuse was so bad she developed an eating disorder and ended up in rehab and almost dying. Boof Nick dated another good friend. He eventually ended up in jail for other reasons, but he had got hit by our revenge too. We called him Boof because that was his way into drugs I'd never heard of, and frankly, still don't entirely understand. He used to beat up on my friend. He tried to force himself on her. Thankfully, she's a giant and fending him off, but he was the reason she didn't date until her 30s. My Nick was, oh boy, started off okay, but he broke my nose and then sodomized me when I was 16. I admit I didn't believe my friends when they tried to warn me. It wasn't until it happened to me that after I lost my poop. After that happened, initially I was broken. I mean, coming back from that is harsh. I tried to kill myself twice. Got pretty close, we stayed dating. I just couldn't leave. I tried about 9 times. To this day, if I'm walking down the street and I hear a loud clicking sound, I go into full panic mode and my husband has to take me somewhere else. Every time I broke things off with him, he'd find me. I didn't have a car, so he'd drive by where I was walking and yell at me to get in. Unlike my friends, my beautiful, wonderful, wholesome, innocent friends, I have an attitude. My pride will kill me one day. No matter how terrified I felt, I never got in the car. Still, we'd get back together. It took about 2 years before the revenge actually happened. By then, all 3 of us girlies were about to be safely on our way to other cities and states for college. The friend who I dated, Boof, had pictures, but the police said it had been too long for any of that to matter. The friend who dated Fat Nick was the kicker. Boof and mine might have taken drugs, but Fatty was the dealer. We planned a party at Fat's house. My buddy had reached back out to her ex and reconciled, and it was her birthday. What better way to celebrate rekindling the romance? Boof and his now ex weren't on speaking terms, so she came with me and my Nick. At this point, we were all 18 at least. Not able to drink, that's for sure. Fat's girl and I put the moves on our respective men. Boof was doing Boof things and pawing stupidly at a freshman in the corner. We got them all very drunk, and then we started with the, "Babe, I've never tried this. Will you try it with me?" for E, which was called Thiz. Boof was somewhere else. Fat and I took some. Thinking they were going to get us high and sneak us off into another room, another friend actually overheard them talking about swapping with each other once they were too high to notice. But because they were so full of themselves, they never thought that we didn't actually take anything. We just acted like we did. About 20 or so minutes later, we gave them the whole, "We're gonna go freshen up. We'll meet you in the bedroom" deal. Peeps of Reddit, the reason that's so common in every dumb high school movie is because teenagers are idiots, and it works. Over and over, always. I don't know how I dated someone that dumb for that long. Whatever. We slid into the bathroom of Boof's ex and then crawled out the window. We then called the police. One of us complained about the noise. One of us mentioned children drinking, and I told them someone had a gun and they were threatening people. That was true actually. Fatty had his dad's gun whenever his girlfriend didn't want to make out. He would take it out, stuff it in her mouth, take the safety off, and then he'd laugh when she started crying. I cannot stress enough what freaking monstrous trash these boys were. The police came. We were down the block when they did. Fat's parents bailed him out, but he lost his scholarship to Chico State and ended up going to the local JC. Boof was in jail, not prison, for 4 months. He was then released on parole, which he violated. My neck was found jerking off in a bedroom with his pants around his ankles, looking like a moron he is when the police actually got there. His brother knew the police, so he was out pretty fast. I wasn't done with him though. He was pretty mad that I left him at the party. I was just a little bit more angry than he was though. I'll wrap up the other 2 boys before I get into that. Fatty's lady is married with 2 kids now. The guy is really awesome. Fatty himself died 7 years after this went down from, I believe, heart murmur. My friend that dated Boof went to an art school and she makes super cute costume cosplays that she sells on Etsy. Seems to be doing great by her IG post. Boof, oh man, he took to the local bars pretty heavily. At one point, he was at a bar talking to some old gay man. Apparently, Poof didn't realize the man was gay until he was hitting on him. The old man invited Boof to his apartment after the bar closed. From what I heard, he attempted to initiate something with Boof. Drunkenly, Boof beat the guy to death. That happened 4 years after the fact. He had gotten out at one point, then did something with arson charges. He's been in prison since. My neck, his revenge didn't see any massive nuclear things. His brother got him out of jail. His brother was a thug type who bred blue-nosed pit bulls for fighting, but he wanted better for his baby brother. He genuinely thought that I would be the one to get his brother out of that town and set him straight. Because he thought his brother was doing so well, he was being financially supported, and Big Brother was understandably worried about when he discovered we broke up for good because I was leaving for college. Big Brother arranged a meetup for me to beg on his brother's behalf. From there, I showed him countless pictures of every time Nick touched me in an unkind way. Cops might not have cared, but Big Brother knew I was a sweet girl. The cops might not have cared, but Big Brother knew I was a sweet girl, and he knew Nick could get bad when he was high. I also had videos on my phone of Nick drinking, underage, getting high, and throwing cash that his brother gave him on the tables for gambling and then losing, then calling his brother for more with some sob story about how he was mugged or left his wallet somewhere. Always some BS. Big Brother always believed it. Right up until he saw proof. He cut Nick off after that. Nick showed up at my dorm 2 cities over a few months later with flowers and jewelry, saying he knew he messed up and I was the one. My RA came out with me and pretended to be my boyfriend. Nick started calling me a whore and making a big scene in the courtyard. Police were called again. These actually seemed to give a dang. They took him away. I didn't hear from him again after I left the state. Kept tabs on him for a while just to make sure he was still miserable. He got a job with the city, working with kids at a local park. My mom was ready with the complaint about seeing him openly carry around 6 years old. He lost his job with no idea as to who did it. He started dating a literal hooker and renting her out to his friends for cash. He's still in that town, slowly getting gentrified into homelessness. Still with that girl, still thinks he's going to be a rapper. Generally seems like he's just bidding time until he dies. He's got a record, thanks to me. No one in that town wants to hire him. Only a matter of time. I'm okay with this. Jeez, those boys live a terrible life and sad and just everything. That is horrible. They got their just desserts though for being terrible as teenagers though. Let's read one more r/ProRevenge story. We'll never see each other again. Think again. I was bullied relentlessly from 3rd to 7th grade by multiple people in class or upper grades. After I graduated to 8th grade, I received a Facebook message from Andy. A boy had been bullying me and harassing me from the very beginning of it all. I would post the exact message, but it was extremely vulgar and long. He ended it by saying that since he would never see each other again, he could put it all out in the open about how much of an idiotic, ugly, and loser I was. Of course, he used a more colorful dictionary with those words, but you get the idea. However, there was one problem. My parents owned a large woodchipper, and his father owned a tree cutting business and would often rent from them for much larger jobs. During the summer, I noticed him walk and talk to my uncle. Then I realized a golden opportunity I had been given. I loaded Facebook on my laptop to bring up the message. I then approached his dad and tell him, "Your son sent this message a few days after graduating, and I think it's really important you read it." He raised an eyebrow at first, but took a look at my laptop. As he read, I could visibly see his face turn blood red and his hand shook as he gripped the sides of my laptop harder and harder. I think he reread the entire thing over again just to make sure what he was reading. He even clicked the profile to make sure it had indeed been his own son who sent it. Finally, He gave me my computer back and told me he was so sorry for his son's behavior and language, and that he would most certainly be dealing with Andy the moment he got home. It took me 2 months to hear back about the fallout. Andy's older and way nicer brother, Grant, was friends with my sister, who told her, and then she told me. Andy was grounded for the entire summer, fall, and winter break. His parents canceled his trip and was going to take him to the beach with their student youth group at church, canceled his summer camp trip, going to hold him back from getting his driving permit for a full year, took away all his games and computer. Instead of going with his dad and brother on their hunting trips, he would be sent to his grandparents' house to help clean. His social media passwords were changed so he didn't have access to them. Deleted his Xbox account, and Andy would have to work for his dad during this tree cutting the entire summer and winter holiday. There were more punishments, but I honestly cannot recall them. I ruined his life for a good 2 to 3 years and destroyed his relationship he had with his father and mother. Probably not forever, but they certainly no longer saw them as a well-behaved youngest child. It was so satisfying. Geez, that kid has some deep-rooted hate in him to be sending messages like that. That was an extreme punishment, but he got what he deserved. The top comment says, so when I read Owned a Woodchipper, I was terrified the story was going in a totally different direction. Me too. Shady former colleagues bullied me into quitting a small town teaching job, so I had their entire school shut down. Long time lurker, first time poster. Throwaway, of course, and I apologize for the long story. This happened a few years ago, but it was recent enough that one of those deservedly affected by the fallout might still be looking for me and might recognize the events I'm going to describe. So of course, names, locations, and other details will have slight alterations. Think of it like transforming a left Ked slip-on to a right Louis Vuitton stiletto. Different enough, but still a shoe. And it fits. I've always been a shy person, and I grew up in a large urban area. In high school, I had friends, but we were the nerdy type and thought of as losers. I was one of the 2 girls of our core friend group of 4 kids. Of course, we eventually dated the guys in our group. The youngest in our group was one of the boys, Doug, in 9th grade, and the oldest was a boy, Clayton, in 11th. The other girl, Sarah, and I were in 10th. I dated Doug all through high school, for which I was relentlessly teased by people outside of our group because he was a bit more than a year younger than me. Sarah and Clayton married in college and are still happily married 5 years later. Doug and I, for our part, got married once he finished college, and we've been married almost 4 years. We have a 1-year-old daughter, Raquel. Both Doug and Clayton eventually got careers in IT. Sarah and Clayton have their own 1-year-old daughter, Amber. Sarah has a small but thriving home business selling refurbished furniture on eBay that she and Clayton find on the weekends. The reason I give so much backstory is that our friend group is pretty isolated. Chalk it up to years of bullying, being made fun of, excluded, you name it. It happened to all 4 of us in school. Even in primary and middle school. Even now, in my later 20s, I don't really have close friends besides Sarah, Clayton, and of course my husband Doug, who is my best friend. This is true, even though we moved all the way to the Midwest for Doug's career, we're still close enough and well off enough so we can regularly fly out and see our friends and vice versa. Doug makes more than enough money to support all 3 of us on his salary alone, especially in our state, and always says it's okay if I'm a stay-at-home mom. However, in this new environment, I thought I might have a fresh start to work on being more outgoing, as it were. No one in my new town knew me from when I was a kid and a total reject. Doug's father passed away, and so his mother lives with us and has generously helped take care of Raquel. We all talked it over and agreed I could go back to college to get a teaching certification for my bachelor's degree, math. Fast forward just a few months, and thanks to an accelerated program and shortage of math teachers in my area, I got my teaching license quite quickly and easily. I also made a few new girlfriends in the teaching program, which helped my self-esteem. So I put in my resume, and within just a few short weeks, I get hired at an independent studies charter school. I was looking to get hired at a regular high school, but whatever. It was a credit recovery school. Basically, the idea of the kids who washed out their regular school district or couldn't succeed there for whatever reason could try to succeed in our setting. We hosted grades 9 through 12. Students would make appointments and come in on their own time, meet independently with teachers, be given assignments and projects, and basically earn a legit high school diploma eventually. I knew it was kind of weird to go back to a place, high school, where I never fit in, but I thought it would be totally different from the perspective of an adult. The school was one large classroom, like the size of a basketball court, with administrative offices, science labs, even an exercise room for PE, all around the perimeter. About 50 student desks were lined around the center of the room in rows, and around these desks were about a dozen teachers. Generally, we'd have 2 teachers per subject area, i.e., 2 English, 2 math, 2 history, etc. And we each had our own roster of students and ensured that they visited all the teachers for whose subject they owed credits. Although the school officially had over 200 students on the various rosters, there were really more than 10 or so students in school at any one time due to different appointments throughout the day. That meant that there was tons of downtime where the teachers would just shoot the breeze with one another. The school had a female principal, a male vice principal, and a male counselor. The other math teacher was a male, both English teachers were female, both science teachers were male, the PE teacher was a male, the art teacher was female, the history teachers were 1 male and 1 female. There was also a male computer teacher and a female music teacher, both whom came in once a week. I could see right away from day 1 that all the teachers were good friends with one another. That's not a bad thing at all. Lunch is at noon every day and the school shuts down for a whole hour. Typically, the other teachers would all go out to lunch with one another, or break off in 2s and 3s. I didn't really know anyone, so I didn't take offense to anyone not inviting me to go to lunch with them. I thought, well, maybe give it a few weeks and it will change. I had that old feeling from when I was a kid of being rejected. Still, I was a new person, so I tried not to take it too personally. Besides, forming relationships, colleagues included, is a two-way street and I could reach out too. Till then, I was at the lunch desk. Sometimes I'd FaceTime hubby, who usually had lunch at that time too, but I was proud of him for making friends at his own work and tried to minimize taking up his time. I didn't really focus on that too much though, and just did my job. Students tended to like me after just a few weeks. It became noticeable that my students made more appointments to see me than other teachers. Every time a student would finish a project or an assignment for a teacher, whatever the subject, they would turn it into their main teacher, the one who had the student on their roster. It soon became clear that the students on my roster were finishing their assignments and graduating at a faster rate than my peers. I didn't plan for this to happen, it just turned out that way. Over time, holidays would pass and our school would have mandated social and team building functions, i.e. potluck in the break room, etc. It seems like I was making progress socially. I was always positive and nice to my peers and would be myself around them, try to tell them about me and learn about them. They were being nice to me too, at least to my face, so I thought I was finally fitting in. One day, however, the principal called me into their office to tell me someone had told her that I was smug and antisocial, and that it wasn't good for the school environment for teachers to bully one another. I was flabbergasted, and of course my initial reaction was to ask who told her this, but the principal said it was confidential and to just work on being nicer. I didn't want to seem intransigent or defiant, so I apologized for hurting anyone's feelings, but I also pointed out that I was trying my very best to fit in, and I had been working on the shortest compared to everyone else, so of course I didn't want to overstep. I also pointed out that students on my roster were graduating at a good pace. I didn't throw shade at anyone of my colleagues. My principal agreed with me on this and praised me heartily. The vice principal happened to be walking by and he overheard the principal praising me. He too threw in a comment that I was an exemplary teacher. The students were praising me in a private room to him, and the school had big plans for me, especially since we were on pace to outperform another independent studies charter school and a few miles away, which competed the same state function. This pleased me, of course, and took the edge off the butthurt of people telling the principal I was not nice. A small, maybe big, red flag was that they told me that students graduating meant massive funding for our school. Money which the regular district didn't want the charter schools to have. And if all the teachers could get more students to turn in work, we might get bonuses. I mean, all that is good, but both of them spoke about students graduation only in terms of how it could benefit our own pocketbooks. Ever since I started working at the school, what had originally been 5 students, 10 at the most working in the classroom at a time, became 20 or more. Almost every one of them a kid on my roster. Every day hanging out for hours and hours doing their work in our quiet classroom environment. I thought this was great because this meant they could graduate sooner and get on with their lives. Gradually, however, I noticed that some of my peers looked resentful when the classroom was so full. I strongly suspect this is because they had been growing accustomed to having long stretches of time simply mess about online at their desks, playing with their smartphones and gossiping. Our school had a policy that unless you were on break, you had to be at your desk and make yourselves available to grade student work in your subject area. They didn't like grading my students' work because eventually credit for that student graduating would go to me, their main teacher. I certainly didn't mind grading work from students who were on other teachers' rosters. That's the whole point of our job. Gradually, I came to realize that the school didn't focus so much on actually teaching the students anything and making sure that their diploma actually meant something than just rubber stamping their work and saying it was satisfactory, using the fact that we were licensed, credentialed, professional as official backup. Really, any reasonable, intelligent adult, or even kid, could do the type of work that some of my colleagues were actually doing. What happened was, say, a kid on my roster is behind 5 credits in English if he wants to graduate. I would then send him to the English teacher to request a packet of English work. Kid would do the work, give it to the English teacher to grade. She would sign off on it, I would input the grade in my computer, and the kid would be 1 credit closer to graduation. It soon became clear to me that the teachers weren't even actually looking at the package before giving them a grade, really just pulling grades out of their butts. I would never dream of doing that on any of my students' math work. That's the way they'd grade for me, but they do it in a slow way as to reduce the speed of students graduating from my roster. As in, they'd let piles of my students' work sit on their desk ungraded while playing Clash of Clans at their desk. I never said anything, and I was always polite and friendly to them, even though I knew at least one of them had badmouthed me to the principal. Needless to say, even months into my new job, I wasn't making friends with my coworkers. I was nice to them, and it seemed at face value that they'd at least respect me on a professional level, at least to my face, so I'd accept that for the time being. The switch came when the principal actually singled me out at a staff meeting as an exemplary teacher. She said that I had come from big city and have succeeded to an amazing degree, and that I had set the record for how many students were graduating high school on my roster. From that point on, I sensed that people were being cold to me. It felt like a high school, except unlike high school, where they would openly mock me as a tall, skinny, no butt, no boobs having giraffe, adults did it in colder ways. On rare occasions, where the whole classroom was empty, or if I'd run into groups with them in the break room, they would talk about all these fun things that they were going to do together after work. Or even talk about the big party they were all going to have at such and such venue, and how everyone's invited, except, obviously. Well, I didn't mind actually. I wasn't going to let them being petty ruin my good feeling I had from helping students and feeling like I was making a difference. I was still very nice to everyone and kept up my positive attitude. Inside I felt so bad and so left out. However, I didn't tell my husband about basically being shunned at work, and instead I focused on just my success and getting students to graduate. Anyway, some of my students would actually quietly complain to me that Miss So-and-so doesn't even grade our work. I never bowed down to my co-workers, especially to the kid. It's important to have a united front, of course, but on the sly, I'd separate those work packets that were clearly not graded properly and look them over myself as best I could. Although I was only licensed to teach math, if, say, a history packet seemed incomplete and yet had a B+, nice work, on the cover of it, I'd sort of quietly, as diplomatically as I could, staple a new cover sheet to it, ask the student to finish it for real, and submit it again to the teacher. I'd make sure the student asked the teacher to grade it in front of him or her, as he or she was eager to see the results of all their hard work. Although the teachers hated it when my kids did this, I did make sure my students' work was legitimately graded as possible. Somewhat surprisingly, students appreciated my determination that they didn't BS their way through what was obviously a BS school. When it came to other teachers' students coming to me with math packets, I did the professional thing and actually went over the packets and gave the tests and quizzes as prescribed in the employee handbook for our schools and as mandated by our state. The other teachers didn't like this, I guess because they were used to teachers just rubber stamping the work and passing, regardless of whether or not it was completely done. Invariably, teachers prefer to send their math kits to the other teacher because he had no problem just breezing through the packets as if they were flip books and assign whatever grade he dreamed of. However, even though for him to just scribble C+, please show your work for each question, on packet covers took no time at all, and he could go back to searching up dating profiles on OkCupid. I found out eventually he was already married. He resented the fact that he graded perhaps maybe 20 math packets in one day, whereas I graded maybe 5 because I graded them and assigned the test and everything, which of course took time. Eventually, other teachers began to grumble too, how it was taking too long to grade their kids' packets and thus slowing down their students' graduation, whereas mine was graduating relatively faster. I began to hear rumors that kids only came to see me, especially the boys, because they wanted to screw me. Naturally, the rumors eventually spread that I was banging the kids. Other rumors spread that I was unqualified to be a math teacher. What was a woman doing being a math teacher anyway? I was just trying to hook up with young studs, all sorts of nonsense. Still, more rumors spread that I was cheating with my graduation rates and that it was all fraud somehow. My husband Doug had actually come to see me on a couple of occasions at the school to go with me to my doctor's appointment, so the staff knew what he looked like. One day I had a phone on my desk when Clayton called to tell me the news that Sarah was coming to visit next month. Unfortunately, my reputation at the school, Clayton's contract avatar showed up hugely on my phone screen when he called in the middle of the day, and one of my busybody coworkers happened to be walking by my desk, saw my phone, and made a face barely concealed contempt. Needless to say, rumors soon spread that I was cheating on Doug with some other young man, along with the high schoolers who I supposedly worked with off the clock. Still, I tried to grind it out, but I would plan my revenge too, if it came to that. I'm mature, but I'm not above getting even. I went through 12 years of junk growing up. I'll be danged if I resign myself to a lifetime of junk as a grown-up. I flatter myself that I was at least sort of cool in college. First thing I did was let my principal know what was going on. My plan was, if she addressed the bullying at the future meeting and put an end to it, then hey, I wouldn't even need to get revenge. I'd just go back to doing my job, minding my own business. I was kind of hoping the principal would back me up, as up until now, aside from the red flag being obsessed with the school getting money and not with students learning anything, she seemed friendly enough, if a bit detached from her school's day-to-day operations. I told her that students would tell me quietly that Mr. So-and-so or Miss What's-Her-Name told them that I was dating a student or cheating on my husband. More than one kid would tell me these kinds of things. I knew the kids weren't trolling me, as over the months I'd established a good rapport with all of them. Principal basically gaslights me and tells me I'm being paranoid. It's a high school, she says. In high schools there's rumors. It's part of the territory. Yeah, I reply. But the rumors are usually from the students, not adults. She doesn't really address this, other than to tell me that I need to grow up and not let petty things like supposed rumors get to me. She tells me to be the bigger person. Nah. I should have mentioned that I had brought my cell phone in with me and had been recording the principal's responses to what I had been saying, which was good for the case I was building. Because as if on cue, the vice principal comes walking by once again, world's greatest Chad, coffee mug in hand. Oh hey Mr. Vice Principal dude, come on in really quick. I thought principal was going to tell him about my concerns about the rumors that I basically both an adulterer and also trying to go to jail for illicit fun with minors. But no, instead, principal and vice principal complained to me that I'm being too thorough in my grading of math work from students on other teachers' rosters. I explained that I'm trying to do my job according to the employee handbook they themselves given me, and according to the 2-day training seminar standard for all teachers of independent study schools where I live, they had mandated I attend prior to my first day of employment. They tell me I need to play ball, and that our task was to get these kids out the door with a diploma in hand. I counter with, what good is a diploma if they don't actually know any history, or how to read, or how to use the scientific method, or whatever. Principal actually calls me pretentious wannabe female Jamie Escalante, a famous calculus teacher. They both strongly encourage me to use my professional judgment, i.e. place my teaching license in jeopardy, by assigning passing marks to work that is clearly not passing. I get all of this on record, and I make sure to email a backup copy of the MP3 to my outside email address. Our school plays a slick when it comes to the school board inspecting our paperwork. Whenever the principal knows the state is coming for our inspection of our packets, an audit they like to call it, they have each of us take extra special care to grade about 3 or 4 packets in the subject area very thoroughly. These packets were placed in a file cabinet in the middle of the classroom, as to imply they represent our average work. All other packets with BS grades on them go into the other file cabinets in the back that the school never invites the inspectors to look at. We tend to empty out students' folders into these file cabinets after they graduate. The school had a policy that once a packet was 3 months old, they only had to retain the cover with the teacher grades and comments to save cabinet space, thereby destroying evidence that actual packet behind the cover was never actually done properly. The phony cabinet in the middle of the classroom represents active work. The only sort of friends I made at the school was the music teacher and computer teacher, who taught small labs only once a week, and both whom had other full-time jobs and were married, not to each other, and had families. The music teacher taught at a local community college and did the charter schools as a side hustle, and the computer guy consulted and made 6 figures. I, therefore, didn't feel too much guilt about what I was going to do. Still, I quietly hinted at my plan to both of them on the day they came to campus, and both were like, do it. After getting the principal and vice principal and the counselor too, who just so happened to be walking by, all encouraged me to basically commit academic fraud. I thought, F them. I also suspected and later confirmed they had a secret buzzer system to surreptitiously call one another from their desks, which is why they always happen to be available at the same time when necessary or convenient. I snuck toward the filing area where all the BS students' work credits were stored, and day by day, over a period of 3 months, took video of hundreds of package covers, all of them labeled with academic grades, teacher comments, and teacher signatures. I, of course, also continued the videos to show page after page of blank work and incomplete work, non-essential work. English packets especially were rife in ridiculous gibberish, sometimes even mocking teachers like, Miss English teacher is a booty hole, and she doesn't even grade our work, lol. And the cover would have Miss English teacher's lady's signature along with the A+, fantastic. You are such a talented writer. Sure enough, after 3 months, secretary, who was also kind of snooty and played on her smartphone and uploaded selfies to Instagram all all day, even though she was like 55. Shredded mountains of bogus work and filed only 3 covers. Shredded mountains of bogus work and filed only covers. Throughout this whole time, I had been slyly walking about the classroom in such a way that other teachers would think I wasn't trying to look at them or what was on their computer, and I'd catch a video of them on Facebook or Plenty of Fish or shopping on eBay, and they have a student interviewing right in front of them. What the actual F? At home one day, I asked Doug how to do a remote microphone that I could control from far away. He's like, "What for? Are you trying to be James Bond?" But he's so smart, and it's like child's play for him. So he personally rigs up one for me at work. Basically, it's like a wireless mic that isn't a detectable Bluetooth, and he sets up a way for me to turn it on and off from far away. I'm like, that's awesome. Can I have 10? He smiles, but he asks no questions because he's awesome like that. Next day, he has a dozen of them. I want it so there's no way devices appear when other teachers turn on their Bluetooth earpieces. I'm always the first at work because my coworkers tend to be irresponsible jerkholes. So even though everyone is supposed to be there at their desk by 8 AM, most of them drift in by 8:10, 8:20, and so on. I'm there at 7:30 just in case. I know the code how to get in keyless entry side door, let myself in, and slip a mic beneath everyone's desk. Each mic has a mini watch battery that is supposed to last quite a long time. I'll bring my own smartphone that I don't use anymore and make sure it was a huge capacity SD card that my husband got for me installed. I connected it as a wireless audio input for the mics. I then hit record, and every day for 2 weeks I hear the teachers, most of whom were wearing Bluetooth headsets. Ever since it became cool to yell gossip across the room, talking trash all day long. Totally unrelated to the work, saying the most inappropriate things about other teachers, the principal, even the kids. Some of these things these middle-aged women would say about what they would love to do with that young blonde god over there made me want to puke. Of course, these teachers were too stupid to simply text one another if they really want to sneak around and talk trash. To them, the Bluetooth thing was easier. It stung, but I knew I struck gold when I heard them spreading false rumors about me. Calling me a F&B, a pretentious big city loser with no friends. They definitely get me fired. They'd also talk about how they didn't grade and just pretend to, and that they were so glad they could just sit all day instead of teach the district. How it was a cushy job, how they were tricking the state inspectors during audits. Every day during my lonely lunches, when they all went off into, I don't know, Applebee's, I loaded up the previous day's MP3s into my real phone and edited out the dead air and keep all the good stuff. I then emailed these separate dated files to my outside email address. This whole time, I continued to grade normal. This whole time, I continued to grade as normal and take my time doing the job correctly. I knew I was going to pull the trigger soon anyway, but the last straw came when the latest student finished her last credit, coincidentally, a math one that I graded thoroughly, and now had enough credits to graduate. Every time a student graduates, we're supposed to blow party horns and give them a little congratulations trophy, and they'd get their diploma in the mail in a week or two later. Students had the option of attending a school-wide formal graduation at the end of the school year in June if they had graduated any time during that year from September onward. Most tended, however, to go right into the workforce or the local junior college or state school. So I blew this little party horn for this girl, and everyone in the classroom, students and teachers, clapped enthusiastically. The girl's mom and dad and little brother came to that day to the classroom, and instead of having the photo with me, they all gave me a big hug. Later, I reviewed the audio recordings that day, and when the girl graduated, other teachers were saying I had switched teams and that I was into eating rug. They also said a lot of really mean things about her and her family, and a lot of totally racist. This family was Hispanic. All the teachers and admin, including me, are white. It just so happened that both the music teacher and the computer guy were on the campus that day. So, in true half-baked fashion, at the end of the day, when the classroom was empty of students and teachers had the last 5 minutes to close down their computers, I walked from teacher to teacher, purse and other small belongings in hand, saying F you, F you, F you. Past the computer guy, you're cool. Passed by the music lady, you're cool. F you, F you, F you. I walk into the principal's office while the other teachers are still in shock. She's at her desk, and I know where her little buzzer button is beneath the desk. The computer guy told me about it because he was the one who installed it. I said, I'm quitting. I don't want to be a part of your criminal school. And just in case that buzzer was just a buzzer and not also a speaker, I pressed the PA button on her wall and said, Miss OP, I'm quitting today because you're all a bunch of hateful, unprofessional, mean-spirited a-holes. Except Mr. Computer and Miss Music, you're cool. I decided to finally take my darling Doug up on his offer for me to be a stay-at-home mom, and I'm cool with my mother-in-law. She can stay. Epilogue. I emailed our school district superintendent, our city's mayor, state governor, the entire school board, our local newspaper with all the files, photos, audio, and video I had taken, along with a terse one-page summary of what had been going on. Within weeks, every single one of the teachers and administrators, except the computer lab and the music lady, who I made a special effort to prove had partaked in no wrongdoing, had been fired and had their credentials at least suspended, and in most cases revoked outright. Only innocent parties like the custodial staff and emerge with their reputation unscathed. All the teachers who worked at the school who had been named in the principal's board's inquiry as having participated in fraudulent practices were blacklisted from teaching there or anywhere. After a few weeks of initial turmoil, all the students currently enrolled at the school were, due to parental pressure, allowed to keep their existing credit completion statuses. Students who had already graduated did not have their diplomas rescinded. All students were given vouchers to enroll at the competing independent charter school down the road. My own former school was shut down, stayed abandoned for a couple of months, but eventually turned into an electronics store. All the other stuff happened within a month of my quitting, but I told my hubby about it on the very day I came home. His eyes lit up like Christmas, and the raging justice boner he developed was just so hard that I was knocked up with our second child even before my back hit the mattress. Clayton and Sarah thought it was pretty cool. I've since made new friends around town to go along with my computer guy and music lady and college friends, especially with other moms. Doug is killing it at work and is thinking of starting his own company. Life is good. TLDR, don't F with the quiet ones. My lord. First of all, I don't know how long this video is going to be, but that story took me 57 minutes and 11 seconds to read. But that was a roller coaster of, that was so detailed in the backstory that I was like, man, this is probably going to get really good. I haven't read it before. I was like, this is my first time reading it, the entire thing. And this probably is by far one of my favorite ProRevenge stories. Like, she went secret agent with the mics underneath desk, walking by with her video, getting a triple, quadruple, quintuple terabyte of SD storage for her phone, cut up the video by herself, send it out to an offshore email. She'd send it to the district superintendent, the mayor, the governor, the entire school board, the local newspaper. She showed everybody. I'm surprised I didn't get the email. This on ProRevenge, I would say, is nuclear revenge, only because she got an entire building of people fired. You have to have some really high confidence in your plan to go out with this too. Congrats on her, keeping her wits during all this too, because I know how hard it can be when you feel lonely and you're getting bullied and all that. Good job to you. I'm glad life is good. Entitled Gossipy Witch sabotages my totally legal romantic relationship with my former teacher, ruins her career, and runs us both out of town. How about I destroy yours and your entire family's whole life? Lady, insert obligatory throwaway account explanation. It applies. I come from a really small town. Think the lidless, most nothing happens here city, extended layover in your flyover state nightmares. And my hometown is even more quiet than that. Think half a mile or more between neighbors, a single main street downtown, one McDonald's, one department store, one movie theater with 3 screens where everyone goes there Friday and Saturday night. Church every Sunday, everyone knows everyone else, or at least knows their business. The whole city is invested in the fortunes of the high school football team, that sort of place. Graduating class of 60, not because the senior class was dumb, it was just a tiny school. I didn't really fit in at school, and kinda was a loner by choice. I cringe about it now that I am almost 26, but I was a wannabe emo goth rocker. I still got invited to a party with other kids, not because they liked me necessarily, but because I just wanted as many people to invite. My mom baked cookies and cakes for church, and when she wasn't doing that, she cut her hair in the town's one salon. My dad owned an internet cafe for a while when those were hot. Once everyone in our little nowhere town got Wi-Fi, he turned it into a tax service. Business is always slow because most people did their own taxes, but he didn't really depend so much on his business. He served 20 years as a petty officer in the Navy, and so he and my mom got by on his pension. In high school, I worked at a private burger place that competed mostly unsuccessfully against the town's single chain fast food restaurant. My boss always told me I should ask my mom to cut my hair and to stop looking like a dang girl. No thanks, old man. So with all this boredom everywhere, you can imagine that the sensation Miss Amber Fontaine caused when the high school hired her to be the 11th and 12th grade English teacher. Miss Fontaine was of French extraction and had moved to America in her later teens to go to college in New York. She was only 24 and very beautiful. She spoke perfect English, but did so with a very pleasant accent. Obviously, all the guys loved her, and lots of women hated her. She appeared oblivious to all the attention, however, and just stuck to her job. Really, we didn't know too much about her. She mostly kept to herself and nobody ever saw her hanging out with any men in town. And it wasn't for lack of men's trying. It soon became clear that she wasn't into dating any of the men in her city had to offer. Much later, I found out that she had just taken a job in our small town to gain experience, with the future goal of being a college professor in a big city. A sort of a 2-year plan. Obviously, I had a crush on her. We all did. It was still a small, church-going town, so nobody really acted out on his urges, or tried to harass her or anything like that. As guys, we talk about how hot she was amongst ourselves. Usual locker room stuff teenage boys do, but that was it. My one real out of school experience with Miss Fontaine was when she stopped by a burger joint I worked at and saw me working there. She told me I had a nice smile and that she wished I smiled more because in school I was always frowning because I was in my emo everyone sucks phase. When the food preppers came up with her food and handed it to me to give to her, I was impressed and not at all surprised that she ordered a salad. She didn't strike me as someone who ate the greasier slop we sold here. In school, the following Monday she smiled at me in the hall and I smiled back. She said, "You're learning," but not in a condescending or patronizing way, just a fun, kidding way, and I exchanged a smile with her every time after. And that was the extent of my great high school romance with Miss Fontaine. Exchanged a few hellos and smiles during my senior year when I was 17. Things changed the following year though. I was 18 and still working at the burger joint when Miss Fontaine comes into the restaurant. "Oh, hey, OP," she says, and she asks with real seriousness, "Are you going to college?" I tell her the truth. I'm working with my band. I cringe about this period of my life too. Playing guitar and saving money for community college. Only sort of the truth about the last thing. Honestly, most of my money I spent on weed and ecstasy. I was the main vocalist in addition to being the guitarist, and our band's only other member were Jerry, the bassist, and Gabe, the drummer. Both of them were just out of high school, like me, and like me, they had no plans to go to college. Gabe worked at the same burger joint as me, and Jerry, who had been one of my best friends in high school, ironically worked at the chain fast food restaurant down the street from my restaurant. Our lives at this time revolved around wasting our youth, skateboarding, getting high, and playing our punk band. We like to think that we played an emo punk metal fusion, but looking back, our sound hasn't aged well. Miss Fontaine tells me that now she's in her 2nd year of teaching, she has a better sense of how to do things. She tells me that she wished that her current students were as well behaved and put as much effort as me. I earned mediocre grades throughout high school, but consistently earned an A in English because I like to read. She says she'll see me around. A few days later, she comes into the restaurant again, and we get to talking, and she asks me if I'd like to go to the movie. I can tell she's bored because there's really no one her own age to hang out with in our town. Or if there are, they're all lame. I think we both get the feeling that it's natural we should hang out. And now I was completely out of high school, and she wasn't my teacher, and we were both adults. By this time, I was newly 18, and she had just turned 25. Why not? So that's how it started. We met up in the early evenings, totally innocent, and go to the movies, or to dinner at the one good restaurant in town. Miss Fontaine was cool about letting me slide when it came to paying for our dates because she knew I made minimum wage. It was actually me who started to push our relationship to the next level. After a while, I started to hold her hand when we walked places. And finally, we started kissing. Never in front of anyone. She taught me a lot of French words and phrases over the next summer and fall while we were going out. My parents knew I was sort of dating my former teacher, but since it was keyword former, they didn't really raise any stink about it. Miss Fontaine would always try to convince me to go to college, but she did see our band play a few times when we got a rare gig at a roller rink, and she was nice enough not to tell us what she really thought of us. We didn't have sex until we'd been dating casually for nearly 2 months. That was my idea too, but she admitted that she really liked me and she wanted it to happen ever since we reconnected earlier that year, after I had graduated. I'm not the kiss and tell type, but my bandmates sort of knew the dynamic in my relationship with Miss Fontaine. She had been Amber ever since we first made out. They appeared cool with it. I stopped doing so much dope and really begun putting money away to save for college. The JC near my house was super cheap. Amber would often tell me she thought about applying there for work, but said that she really wanted to move to West Coast or back to the East Coast to teach at a college. Eventually, she told me she'd like me to come with her. After a few months, I was in love with Amber, and she was in love with me too. She said, "We didn't throw our relationship in people's faces or show public affection, but it's not like we pretended not to know each other either." Amber had come around the house and my parents really liked her and thought she was a great influence on me. I didn't expect to cut my hair, but I was neater and more presentable, and eventually I really did begin enrolling in GE classes at my local 2-year. But then things went downhill fast. Out of seemingly nowhere, Amber got a call for a meeting from the local school board, and this is my secondary account of the situation. as Amber was the one there, not me. There have been reports that she was dating a former student, romantically. They were talking about me, and that she was having sexual relationship with said student while he was still a minor and still attending high school. Of course, she denied everything. Of course, they believed nothing. She had sent me a desperate text, and since ours is a small town, I think I've mentioned that a couple times already, I was at the meeting in literally 10 minutes. I told him the truth, that I was in Miss Fontaine's class in 12th grade, and that I was her student. That was all. I told the truth that we were reconnected several months after graduation, and only then did we begin dating. And I was over 18. The opinion of the board was essentially, look son, we appreciate the noble effort you're making to defend your friend's honor, but we're looking for the truth here, not omissions. I insisted that I was telling the truth and not trying to cover anything up. After a lot of tears, Amber was simply warned that it wasn't becoming of a teacher to be seen with students outside of campus, even if they're former students. And we assumed that was all. We were really wondering who had complained about us, or who would make up the tales about us having sex while I was still a minor and a student of Amber's. I was staying at Amber's apartment by this time. I kicked in a portion of the rent, of course. I had even met her parents, albeit only on webcam. They were good people. They don't speak a lot of English, but Amber filled them in with the missing pieces. They knew my age, and they were cool about it. We assumed it was just a small town gossip, and it would blow over. Boy, were we wrong. Over the next several weeks, Amber's meeting with the school board, vicious rumors that started to spread. I won't insult your imagination, you know what people were saying. One day, my boss at the burger joint just told me he had to let me go. Some flim-flam excuse about the store losing money, and my hairstyle was driving away customers. Whatever, dude. Amber told me it wasn't my fault, and she promised to support me when I look for another job. But then one day, she got fired too. She was working as a probationary teacher, it meaning that during her first 2 years, she could be fired for any reason, and actually, no reason had even been given. Explanations were for those who earned the tenure. We both knew why she was getting fired, but the district strongly implied that it was simply because she was an ineffective teacher. In her defense, I looked at the data on the district website, and the number of students from our school who did well on standardized tests in her subject area leaped by double-digit points during the time she was a teacher there. Her numbers were far above state average, and to this day, since her departure, the same scores have nosedived. Amber told me that students tended to respond to her, and that she was very popular among the students. It was true that she was immensely popular when I was a student, and I'll assume the same carried true to the year after I graduated. Aside from the obvious fact that she was eye candy, she was simply a good teacher, a good person, and that's why the kids liked her. Lots of students threatened to riot when she was fired, but being a non-dramatic, non-attention-seeking person she is, Amber asked them just to focus on their studies and doing well, and helping their new teacher adjust he or she arrived to take her place. My dad told her she ought to sue the district, but Amber didn't want the drama. Besides, she said she was allowed to resign, so that it wouldn't show up on her record as of having been fired. Also, she said that the district promised not to try to revoke her teaching credential. Her own parents suggested maybe she had to come home, to France, but she insisted on sticking it out in America. My parents were cool and they offered to let her move in with us while she figured out her life. She's lucky that her parents are well off because they gave her some money to relocate to California. She asked me please come with her, that she loves me, and that we could start new there. I've always wanted to move to California, so I jumped at the chance. My parents were happy that I was in a relationship with a good person who obviously cared about me and gave us some money too. We got an apartment together in Los Angeles area. Neither of us drove, so we both got bikes to get around. Our new area was a world apart from our old life. Though I know Amber's own teenage years were in Paris, so Los Angeles would have been much of a culture shock to her. I immediately enrolled in a local community college and got a job as a waiter in a popular French restaurant. Our gimmick was that some of the servers actually spoke French. Over the last several months, Amber had taught me a lot of French, so I was a very popular server at the restaurant because I gave it authenticity. Unfortunately for Amber, the school district misled her about teaching license. When they promised not to have her license revoked, they spoke the truth, but they left out the part where they attached an official reprimand to it, accused her of an inappropriate relationship with students under her charge. So whenever Amber applied for teaching jobs, this would immediately come up as a red flag on her applications. Another surprise red flag was that the school she applied to would notice that she was fired from her last job. No, I wasn't, she'd say. I resigned. Yeah, but it says you were forced to resign to avoid termination for cause. Amber was 7 years older than me, but I think in some ways, I know a lot more about how nasty Americans can be than her. Everywhere she went, doors would slam career-wise. She appealed to the state teaching license organization, and they said they'd look into it, but months later, nothing came up. Calls to her former school resulted in getting a runaround. No one knew anything. So for the next several months, I was paying our day-to-day bills and helping to support Amber. Though I must acknowledge that the loans both our sets of parents gave us helped tremendously, and we couldn't survive without them. Finally, one day, Amber tells me, you know what? Screw trying to teach public schools. Oh, and OP, I'm pregnant. So 2 pieces of good news. Many months later, Amber and I are happily married. Wedding was beautiful in sunny Los Angeles. Amber's parents and mine and our other families had all attended. We had a pregnant honeymoon in France, and now we have a son, Rechule. I'm closing in on earning my associates in information technology. I've been promoted to maitre at the restaurant and have health benefits for my wife and son. We live in a studio apartment, but at least it's a huge studio. And that's enough for now. Amber stays home with the baby, but she also teaches online English and French courses for a private school. So even though she's blacklisted from teaching in the public K-12 district, she can still teach, which is her passion. More months pass and I got my first job in IT, troubleshooting computers for a small company downtown. I make double what I used to make at the restaurant, and my employer has a program where I can finish my bachelor's while I work, and they will subsidize 50% for free, and the other 50% they will dock from my pay in small monthly installments. Sounds like an amazing deal, and I take it. We moved to a bigger apartment. Amber is making her awesome contribution both as a mother and to our finances with her tutoring. We're planning for her to eventually go back to school for her graduate degrees so she can finally fulfill her dream of teaching in college. Oh, more good news? OP, I'm pregnant again. Life is sweet. So while everything is going awesome, one day, I get a text from my mom. She was at a local school board meeting with her neighbors regarding a bill proposal to hire more teachers. Apparently, over the past few years, the population has grown and the high school needed to expand. So now, it's a 2-horse town, my mom says. While she was at a meeting, my mom ran into Jerry's mom. Jerry was a bassist for my own band that I quit once I got into a serious relationship with Amber. My mom never met Jerry or his mom, or at least in the way that connected them to me. The reason was because I never brought Jerry around our house. Because for a couple years, Jerry was my drug supplier. He had the hookup for anything you wanted. Well, what does all this have to do with anything? My mom doesn't know Jerry's mom, but she hears her and some lady talking about me and Amber. My mom heard them saying that Jerry had been the one to tell everyone about Amber and me supposedly having sex before I graduated. And his mom went straight to the school board. Their names as informers were protected under confidentiality. I had lost touch with Jerry over the years and had stopped playing music with him long ago. I knew he had resented all the time I was spending with my chick. It's a shame because he used to be such a good friend of mine. It sucked that he was getting behind my now wife and mother of my child and soon to be children fired from her career. Jerry's mom was a teacher at Amber's former school of employment. It became a joke of ours that his mom had a huge stick in her butt regarding prim and proper behavior and was a goody two-shoes teacher whose poop don't stink. Yet her kid Jerry, a student at her school, is basically the biggest drug dealer in town. Also, looking back, I know he had a crush on Amber too, and probably always resented that I got to be in a relationship with her and he didn't. Maybe it's because she knows quality, you jerk. I was interested in learning that Jerry's mom was now on the school board. I didn't tell Amber about this all right away. I just asked her to let me know what she remembered about Miss Jerry's mom. She told me that Jerry's mom was always really mean to her and often one of the main instigators in getting everyone, the adults, on campus to exclude her from teacher social activities. It's one of the main reasons why Amber didn't make friends with the other teachers. Amber tells me that the male teachers tended to be nicer to her at first, but the female teachers overwhelmingly despised her before they even knew her. Jerry's mom, Amber told me, was also the teacher she knows who started a petition not to renew her contract for a second year at the school. This was the first I heard about this. Evidently, only a few female teachers signed the petition, but the petition was placed in Amber's permanent file as evidence that the staff lacks confidence in her. They were basically setting her up to be fired even though she was doing a good job at teaching and the students liked her. Well, I'm more Cali than Iowa these days, but I still keep in touch with a few friends, now grown up, I knew in school, including Gabe, the drummer from our old band. From what I hear, Jerry manages the burger joint I used to work at, because the old guy who owns it is retired. I have a social media account, but only use it to contact people in emergencies. I never update anything. My profile is practically blank online. I'm not one of those people who checks it daily or uploads pics of my lunch. Didn't post about marrying or having kids or moving to LA. I told people matter directly. Jerry was still my friend on social media even though we stopped talking ages ago. So I clicked his profile. Yep, he definitely managed the old place of employment. I clicked on his friends and family's profiles and recognized his mom, my old history teacher. She was on the school board now, sanctimonious as ever. I think I mentioned before that I came from a small town, and in a small town, there often isn't anything for bored kids to do other than do dumb stunts or do drugs. And for the biggest loser kids of all, the group that included me, we were dumb enough to record ourselves partying and talking junk and doing that aforementioned drugs. That's exactly what my band used to do all the time. Whenever we had a show, we'd go around taping ourselves using our cell phones. We'd take a video of us rocking out, skating, drinking beer at the vacant lot, take video of us getting high. We'd also talk to the camera. I hadn't thought about the old recordings in years, but I never erased them from my old phones. I'm the kind of guy who hoards his cell phones, not because I think they will increase the value or that I find them especially interesting, but I kind of think of them like file cabinets of my past because I don't erase anything, aside from phone numbers. I don't really transfer data on one phone to a successor, easy as it would be. My current boss knows I used to do drugs, and they don't care. In IT, I'm told everyone used to get lit, and many still do. I asked my wife offhand if her new job knows about what happened in our old town. She says yeah, but they don't care about any of that. They only care that she teaches expert level conversational French. That's what their clients, many of them traveling professionals, demand. Many of her co-workers, she tells me, had a few felonies on their records, but her employer was a firm believer in rehabilitation. Copacetic. So I check some of my old videos and find what I need. I have no trouble finding videos of Jerry getting high as a mother effer. That was practically every video. And in practically every video, he brags about his parents know he's a druggie and a dealer and want to ship him off to the army and make a man out of him. The video I really want is, nope, it's not on this phone. Maybe the LG? Nope, just more of Jerry rolling on ecstasy at a rave we snuck in out of state to attend when we were in 11th grade. Maybe my old Galaxy? Bingo. Jerry talks about how his mom knows all about the drug use and sometimes even smokes weed herself with his dad, and how they caught him with cocaine once and yelled at him and his dad kicked his butt. But then Jerry came home the next day from school to find his mom was coked out on the kitchen table and that she had called in sick that day. The video was time-stamped. I think that'll do. I still don't tell Amber. It would only upset her in her condition. But I asked my mom to contact the info of all the people who run the little town school board. I already know the school's basic email address, and I graduated not too long ago, and so most of the administrators are still mid-career at my former high school. I still have their emails. I make a throwaway email account and attach the relevant video to it, and send it to everyone that matters in town. All the teachers, the administrators, even from the elementary and middle schools. The church, the pizza place, the burger joint owner, the roller rink boss, you name it, they got the files. The files where Jerry exposes himself as a coked out drug dealer with his mom having full knowledge of the fact and her husband even indulging in the drugs himself. The next day, Amber asks me while she's feeding our son, "Honey, why are you so happy?" I tell her, and she starts crying. "No, I'm not sad," she reassures me. "I'm just so happy you did this for me." Then me, Amber, Rachule, and our bun in the oven goes for a walk because such a nice day. Still, need a haircut. Not getting one. Do I even need to say what happened afterward? All this ancient history shouldn't matter, but in a small town, it's devastating. The videos are just of Jerry talking trash. Who knows if they even tell the truth? Doesn't matter. In a small town, gossip becomes gospel. Kind of how everyone believed me and Amber were screwing before I turned 18, even though that was 0% true and they ran us out of town on a rail. My parents had to endure the fallout of my disgrace when I left town years ago with my French tramp, as all the idle busybodies have dubbed my wife. My mom and dad made their peace with it and have numbed themselves to the slurs, and always stood up for us. They are what's good about small town America. Jerry got fired from his job, police searched his house, and that is to say, his mom's house, and found a lot of drugs. Evidently, when the rumors went flying that Miss Jerry's mom had a drug-dealing son, kids busted for drugs in the high school caved under pressure to admit who hooked them up. Oopsie, so he was telling the truth. Jail for you, cock-blocking D-bag. His mom was summarily dismissed from her job, along with the appropriate blacklisting that being a drug-abusing, child-endangering, fraud-committing public official essentials. My mom wasn't clear on the details, but there's a possibility she and her husband might face jail time too. It came out that Jerry's dad had been cheating on his wife for years with a woman from the church. Jerry's whole family and persona non grata. They want to leave town but can't pending court case. Until then, they'll just be hated to their face. I'll hate them from across the country. Small town. Everyone knows everyone. Or at least their business. Which means sooner or later, word will slip. People will drop the "it's confidential" charade and figure out that I was responsible for a family's downfall. I don't give a freak. Jerry, you listening? Good. Come at me, bro. Remember at the beginning when I said I knew this had to be a good story? That was an understatement. I know like 3 stories ago I said that was my favorite story about the teacher, but this teacher story is even better. This is crazy. This is written like a novel almost. I cannot believe he sent that video to everyone, like the freaking owner of the burger place too, and the church people. That sabotage, that revenge. This is not ProRevenge. He's not a professional. This is nuclear revenge. He nuked that entire family's life. They got exactly what was coming to him. Jerry for being a snitch, his mom for being a snitch to the school goddamn council, Jerry's dad just cause he's Jerry's dad cheating. I enjoyed this story to an extreme amount. I'm saving this. Again, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you like the robot voice videos, remember that is on our second channel. This channel from now on is going to be me reading with my voice or reacting to other videos and stuff from Reddit. Thank you guys so much for staying to the end of this long video. This will probably be the longest video I have ever made so far, aside from my live streams, obviously. If you are subscribed or if you are not subscribed, remember to hit that bell and hit to get all notifications. I do post once a day on this account. Thank you guys again for watching and listening to this amazing story about this crazy entitled gossipy witch. I hope I see you guys next time, and goodbye.